From the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with your 4:30 update this Wednesday, March 17th for the severe thunderstorm event. If you joined us at 11:30 for this briefing, we've made some tweaks to the radar simulations, and we made a very slight adjustment to storm arrival time. You know, we've seen this so many times before where we predict a range of time where storms could arrive and then they tend to come a little bit earlier than that. So based on some of the newest guidance since 11:30, we've tweaked the timing about an hour or so earlier than what we conveyed. Not a big change, but just subtle change. All right, so before we jump into the slides, a bunch of things here to point out here on this briefing. Of course, let me remove the satellite image, and we could see where the storms are occurring right now. You see there's a bunch of tornado warning polygons. There's some flash flood warning polygons. The red are severe thunderstorms. So things have been quite busy. Here was the earlier Storm Prediction Center outlook. Remember, I showed this earlier, and the pink is the high risk area, the bullseye. And indeed, this whole area is lighting up with severe weather as had been predicted. So how this sort of impacts and plays out for us, let me, oh, and I will point out real quick here since I've got this shown here, bear with me for just a second. Oh, there's the button. Okay. For some reason, the LSRs aren't loading. But I will point out that I have seen a couple confirmed tornadoes and some, about a dozen or so instances of wind damage reports. So the reports so far have not been prolific as one would have thought. In fact, here's the webpage, current storm reports webpage from SPC. And these are all basically damage reports. And the red are tornadoes, the blue are wind damage, the green is hail. And you can see, it's not like crazy coverage of storm reports, but I'm sure that, they're in the midst of the event right now. So I'm sure reports are still pouring in. Okay, so anyway, looking back toward our area, and then sure enough, we stayed pretty cool today. We were forecasting highs in the lower 60s yesterday for today, and that quite hasn't happened. And that's, of course, thanks to clouds and thanks to cool air that's dammed up against the mountains and cold air damming, as we refer to it. And a good way to demonstrate that is look at the warm air way to our north. It's about 14, 15 degrees warmer in Pittsburgh, PA than it is in our neck of the woods. So, you could see temperatures all the way up into the mid 60s up to Lake Erie. Lots of warm air to our north and to our west and to our south and basically all around us. But you'll see there's this pocket of cooler air that, as it often does, east of the mountains gets trapped. And look west of the mountains, immediately it warms up. There is a warm front down across, you could see as this transition from 70s, 60s into the 50s, there is a warm front in here. So the expectation is the overall circulation of this system is basically, counterclockwise. So some of that warm air will try to feed its way up into the Carolinas here over the next 24 hours. And the big caveat in question is it relates to us. And this is really important because this will determine who gets what. But where is that warm front going to find its, where's it going to orient itself? Is it going to just blow north and everybody's in the warm sector, and then everybody has an opportunity for severe weather? Will this cold air in the Triad and the Northwest Piedmont get locked into place because of rain tomorrow morning? And then the warm front looks something like this, and then storms ride up along the warm front. Okay, that is the more likely scenario. We think some cold air will remain cooler, I should say, not cold, but cooler, relatively speaking, to what's to the east and south, will get stuck across the Triad and Northwest Piedmont. And although there will probably be some storms across the Triad tomorrow, we think that the worst of the severe weather will find its way and occur along that boundary. Sometimes we refer to that as a wedge boundary that will get hung up somewhere along the US 1 corridor. Okay, so that's the caveat here, is where does that rain fall in the morning and where does the cold air get locked in? And I think the Northwest Piedmont has the best chance to get locked into that cool air, which means the worst of the severe weather remains to your east and to your south of the Northwest Piedmont and Triad. Okay, so a little bit info there based on current observations. And I will mention here on this slide, pretty much we've conveyed this earlier. You know, high winds with straight line winds with damaging thunderstorm winds. You know, all of central North Carolina has the potential to see that, with the worst of those damaging winds expected 30 miles either side of US 1. Tornadoes, strong to violent, long track tornadoes can't be ruled out. That's what a level 4 out of 5 is. A level 4 out of 5 on this graphic right here doesn't necessarily mean the number of tornadoes. It means the intensity as well. And that's what we're conveying here with that level 4 out of 5, is that if there are tornadoes, they potentially could be strong to violent, potentially even long track. Now, tornadoes could happen anywhere. Again, depends on where that warm front finds itself. But the worst of it, we think, is going to be either side, about 30 miles either side of US 1, because that's where we think that front's going to get hung up. Okay, so anyway, hail, again, you know, hail the size of quarter to golf ball just about anywhere in central North Carolina, but the biggest hail basically along in either side of US 1. Lightning is possible anywhere, and flash flooding is possible anywhere where multiple storms train across a given area. Okay, here are the updated reflectivity simulations that I promised, and you'll see that pretty much all of central North Carolina is fine up until at least noon. Now, I will point out that one thing I didn't show was some rain that is expected to move across the western half of North Carolina, and that would include areas, you know, from the Triad south to Anson, Stanley County, and over toward, you know, basically the western Piedmont. Some light rain is expected to fall across those areas during the basically pre-dawn hours, maybe lingering in through the morning commute. And again, not shown on here because it's before the 12 p.m. time frame. And again, setting the stage perhaps for a boundary to be set up along US 1. And then, of course, you see the 2 p.m. time frame. There's those storms marching across the western Piedmont. Notice it's not terribly, you know, enhanced colors across the Triad. That's good news, right? So we think that actually makes good conceptual sense to what we're thinking will happen, because we think that cold air is going to be locked in across the Northwest Piedmont. Again, for folks in the Triad, you know, you still could see a pretty strong wind gust. You know, don't be surprised if you see a 40-mile-per-hour wind gust. There's a lot of dynamics and a lot of winds with this system. It's just the worst of it should be to your east. Again, talking about the Triad, folks. Now, finally, once that line encounters that boundary that we've been advertising somewhere along the US 1 corridor, notice how the storms just light up. And there could be, you know, boundaries help to cause storms and supercells to rotate. So that's why we think somewhere 30 miles either side of the US 1 corridor is the place with the best chance to see one of those, you know, tornadoes that I talked about. I'm not saying everywhere along US 1 is going to see this. In fact, most places tomorrow will say, you know, well, we just had a couple trees down here and there. You know, we had a couple, you know, quarter-size hail is what most people will see. Okay, but there will be a few locations where there is enhanced damage. And that's what I'm saying. The 30 miles either side of US 1, somewhere in there, there's going to be a couple, you know, corridors of enhanced damage. And I just can't pin that down right now. And then finally, once that line of storms moves east, it really gets past I-95, it pretty much just fizzles out. And then we're just left with some lingering rain showers overnight. And in fact, it'll turn kind of colder. And let me kind of show you just for a little more detail, because there's something else interesting I was going to point out real quick. Here, let me just go back and show the same model, but let me just loop back. And let me just run through. Let me try to make it so that you could see here. Let me just run up through. This is midnight tonight, 1 a.m. tonight, 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, 4, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And you'll notice there's a spotty rain showers that I mentioned, you know, pre-dawn tomorrow morning. And again, the impact that those showers will have will help to reinforce that cooler air. Okay, and then 8 o'clock, we get a couple hours of dry weather, and then here comes the line of storms. noon, 1 o'clock across the Triad region. And then by 3 o'clock, we're talking, from Anson County over toward Randolph County and up through Alamance and Orange County. And then things really get going here as these storms encounter that boundary. So again, we're talking along the US 1 corridor, either side. Some of these storms could be rotating. And then as it moves away from that boundary, those storms weaken, and then they just pretty much fall apart thereafter with just some lingering showers. But watch what happens as the night progresses. We just have kind of off and on showers. Meanwhile, during the middle of the night into Friday morning, it's going to be turning cooler. And look what this particular model does. It actually has a few snowflakes along the Virginia border come 1 p.m. Friday. Believe it or not, severe weather Thursday and turning much colder with the potential for perhaps even a few snowflakes come midday Friday, believe it or not. So that won't amount to anything. I just wanted to show that here because I don't want people to be surprised if suddenly you're seeing people tweeting about, hey, there's snowflakes in the air here Friday midday and afternoon. This isn't going to amount to anything. But nevertheless, interesting couple days of weather we've got here. So just wanted to point that out. All right, so what else do we got here? Here's another graphic. I tweaked this a little bit. This graphic seemed to be liked by a lot of folks here because it kind of gives you, if you step out and take a 50,000 foot view of this graphic, you can kind of get a sense for the time range. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I think the blue area, the area encircled by the blue, is where we think the worst of the severe weather will occur. And the timing range you see there, we bumped that up by just about an hour. So instead of coming in at 3 to 6, we made it 2 to 6 p.m. So storms could be affecting anywhere in this blue box by 2 p.m. And we expect, and there is a little overlap, of course, because, obviously we're still a day away and things could change. And we're, quite frankly, we can't nail it down to county level. And so we do allow for a little bit of overlap in these boxes. Okay, but there's a general sense of the timing of the severe weather. So mainly an afternoon into evening event, earlier in the day west, later in the day east. Okay. All right. So I wanted again just add a couple caveats and things to watch tomorrow. So what are the things that I'm going to be watching tomorrow morning? First thing, I'm going to be watching how much rain falls across our area Thursday morning. Does that rain keep us cool and limit the severe potential? Or does somehow that warm air just blow through all of central North Carolina on strong southerly winds and set the stage for a more widespread severe weather outbreak? Those are things I'm going to be watching. I don't have the exact answers right now, but that's what I'm going to be watching. I'm also going to be watching the position of that wedge boundary that I talked about that separates cooler, more stable air across the Piedmont and Triad from the warm, humid, juicy air across the southeast Piedmont, the Sandhills, and coastal plain. Okay, severe storms take advantage of those boundaries. And often these boundaries are the focus for rotating supercell thunderstorms. So I'm going to be watching the position of that boundary. And then I'll be also keeping a close eye on what's happening upstream in South Carolina earlier in the morning. And anytime there's long track supercells, rotating thunderstorms in South Carolina, those always have to be closely watched because they may hold together as they approach North Carolina. So those are the things I'm going to be really keeping a close watch on tomorrow morning as all this plays out. Okay. So wrapping it all up, the what is numerous to severe thunderstorms on Thursday. The when is mainly from, late morning, probably more like noon west through the early evening east. The where is basically anywhere in central North Carolina can experience severe thunderstorms. And what do we mean by that? We mean damaging winds, probably some trees down, some quarter-size hail. However, the more amped up severe weather, we expect the greater magnitude or the worst of the severe weather we expect to occur 30 miles either side of the US 1 corridor. And that said, we expect highly damaging straight line winds, large hail, and a few significant tornadoes in that corridor that I talked about. Obviously, down trees, down power lines, power outages, and structural damage are all possible with the severe storms, and particularly the tornadoes. Okay. So again, everybody by now should be planning for what they're going to be doing tomorrow and figure out ahead of time where you'll be and where you're going to seek safe shelter for where you'll be this tomorrow afternoon. So when warnings are issued, you can immediately take action. Okay. So make sure you have several ways to receive our alerts. And then finally, we'll be updating these slides. Our midnight shift will update these slides and send them out at the end of their shift. And then I will be updating them as soon as I start my day up tomorrow morning. And we do have a briefing scheduled for 11:30, but I may move that up a little bit earlier. We'll see. It just depends on how things play out. But suffice it to say, we will be keeping you updated throughout the duration of this event and through the event, particularly tomorrow. Okay. And as always, I just want to throw out one last thing. If you do experience severe weather, have damage in your area, see any kind of high winds, hail, or any kind of damage, it's really, really important for us to get ground truth information, because the radar only tells us what's happening above the ground. People tell us what's happening at the ground. So certainly we certainly would wish anybody who experiences severe weather, after it's safe to do so, to give us a call or let us know somehow what you experienced. Okay. So anyway, with that, wraps up our 4:30 brief.